So today, boys, we're going to look at the human defense system. And our learning intention for this lesson is to be able to describe the human defense system in humans. But you can see the word there called general defense system. So that's a really important word for our lesson today. So when we're looking at the general defense system, we're talking about all pathogens. The word pathogen, some of you might be familiar with that term. So we would have mentioned before that a pathogen is a disease-causing organism. So it's a disease-causing organism, which is a living thing. So we might be describing that as some form of bacteria, maybe a fungi, or right now we will be using the word pathogen to describe the coronavirus. General is really important. It means the body does not care what type of pathogen is entering it. So it could be MRSA bacteria, it could be the fungi that causes athlete's foot, it could be the coronavirus, it could be a pollen cell for those that suffer from hay fever, anything that the body did not make. So it's really our defense against everything. Our body sees it as a threat and it's going to respond to it. So for general, I'm saying that it's not specific. So it's not looking for one particular type of bacteria or one particular type of virus. So it's not specific. It's going to protect our body against everything. Another term I'm going to use a lot today will be the word immunity, which is really our body's defense system. So immunity is the body's ability to fight infection. And these past few weeks and future few weeks, we really will be relying on that in our body for our body to be able to fight infection. You can see I've already drawn out one diagram, and over the diagram I have our first line of defense, and then down here further I've written about our second line of defense. But both lines of defense are general. This is how our body is going to react firstly to stop bacteria getting into our body. And this is our second reaction that we're going to have. So it's like we're putting up a defense almost like an army defense. So these are the first things we can do. These are the second things we can do. And tomorrow we'll talk about the third line, which is really our last line of defense that our body can use. So for this, I'm going to fill in. You can see that I've just drawn the outline of a body. The parts I'm really interested in are the yellow parts that I've highlighted. So they're the parts that our body is really going to react to and try to defend any threat that comes into the body. So some of them are pretty easy ones that you will have known already. So maybe the first one I'm going to focus on is the idea of our nose and how our nose protects us. So our nose forms a mucus. And there are tiny hairs in our nose as well. And we call these hairs cilia. And we've mentioned that word before. So our nose would be a general line of defense. The mucus would trap any bacteria or fungi or viruses coming in. And then the hairs would do the same job. Here our eyes play a key role as well. And I've pointed, I suppose, to the tears, and I'm going to just put another angle up to our eyes there. So for our eyes, the idea of blinking. So our eyelashes preventing pathogens from getting in. And the idea of our tears. Our tears contain enzymes. Now, the enzyme's name is lysozyme. If you remember that, it would be fantastic. And what the lysozyme actually does is it will break the cell walls of bacteria or fungi or viruses. And all the liquid in them seeps out and they die. Now for lysozymes, it's in tears, like I mentioned. It's also in your saliva. It's also in sweat. It's also in urine. So you could mention any of those for lysozyme, but I suppose I'm basing this on the eyes, so blinking our eyelashes, And then our tears contain enzymes, and the lysozyme will try to destroy any pathogens coming into our body. Next, then we move down to, I suppose I've just highlighted one part of the body here, but obviously skin is an organ that we have all around our body. So our skin would be another line of defense, a really important line of defense. So our skin acts as a barrier, preventing anything from getting into our bodies. Also, the ability that our skin, the platelets, can clot our blood and forming a scab, so to prevent the entry of anything if we have a wound. Or also the idea of our sweat, that our sweat is quite acidic and it can kill bacteria. And you'll see this word like sebum, sebaceous glands, which means oil on our skin, and oil in our skin can prove to be quite toxic to bacteria or fungi trying to escape into our skin or into our bodies. The next area we would have is our stomach. And from our chapter on digestion, you'll be familiar that our stomach is quite acidic. And you might be familiar that the acid is called hydrochloric acid. And that's going to kill any bacteria that tries to get into the body as well. So I'm going to move across now to the other side. And we're going to look at the idea of our trachea. And we would have spoken about this maybe before when we were doing our breathing system, and we would have spoken of the idea that we have tiny little hairs in our trachea, which are called cilia, and they naturally brush up the mucus that might be going into our lungs, and it goes back into our mouth and down our esophagus into our stomach. So it has tiny hairs called cilia, and that cilia will protect us from bacteria or fungi or viruses getting down into our lungs. And I suppose in the topical moment now, this is one that we're really discussing as well. So I'm just going to mention in a respiratory tract that I'm talking about trachea, and the idea that trachea has tiny hairs in it, and those hairs are called cilia. I'm going to move down further then to, I suppose, the reproductive system of a female can be seen here. So I'm just going to mention the idea that in a vagina in a female, that is protecting the womb, which might carry the baby. So the vagina makes its own acid, so it's acidic, and it's called lactic acid. So protects the body from bacteria or fungi or any kind of infection. And just here as well, we would have the urethra, which is part of the urinary tract and excretion. We haven't discussed that chapter yet, but the urethra from your junior cert you will be familiar with, or the urinary tract. And just the idea for you to be aware, and you probably know this already as well, that urine is acidic. And even the constant flow of urine out of the body is very important to make sure that bacteria or fungi is being flushed out of the body all the time. So boys, just a quick recap and overview of our first line of defense in our body. So we have the nose, and the nose produces mucus to trap bacteria, and hairs as well called cilia. The eyes for blinking and tears, and they contain an enzyme called lysozyme, which will break down cell walls of pathogens. The skin acts as a natural barrier. It can also our ability to clot our blood. Sweat is quite acidic, and the oil can be quite toxic. The stomach is acidic, and the hydrochloric acid makes that acidic condition to break down protein, but its advantage is that it will kill bacteria as well. The idea of the urinary tract, that urine is acidic as well for pathogens to grow or to develop or to multiply in, and that the flow of urine pushing those pathogens out of our body all the time is very important. The idea of our nose, that it contains a mucus and hairs, like I mentioned already, and our trachea, that it contains hairs as well to push that mucus back up, out and away from the lungs. And the idea of the vagina in a female being acidic and protecting the womb and the organs above it. So I suppose the next question is, what do we do if our eyes and our nose and our first line of general defense can't protect us? So we have to move on to the second stage then and hope that something else is going to help us out. So if we're looking at our second line of defense, we're saying, how is our body going to react to help defend us? And one thing that we'd be very familiar with is the idea that we develop a fever. So our temperature goes quite high. So it's higher than that 37 degrees, which was its optimum temperature for enzymes to work. And why is it going higher or greater than 37 degrees? It's hoping to kill the enzymes. So it's hoping to denature enzymes of bacteria or any pathogen that's invading the body. But we know that we have to get it back down to regular temperatures when that has happened, or else our own enzymes in our body will be damaged. Another line of defense that we might be familiar with in our second line of defense might be the idea of a histamine. You might be more familiar with the idea of antihistamine creams, which you might have used for a rash or a bee sting. A histamine is a chemical that our body makes. And the reason our body makes that is because it causes our blood vessels to dilate. And that means that we have more white blood cells, which I'm going to mention in a moment, flowing to the area that's been challenged or under threat. So I'm just going to put WBC for white blood cells. And when they dilate, they become more porous as well. So the white blood cells can act a little bit better than before. Another aspect then to our second line of defense will be the idea of white blood cells that we've spoken about before when we studied the chapter on blood. And those white blood cells, now I know we studied two types, but the white blood cells that we're going to examine today are the ones that are called monocytes. Now I'm going to just draw a quick outline of a monocyte for you. And I'm going to pretend that it's trying to attack something like bacteria. So bacteria is my pathogen in the example that I'm using with you here. And here, this is like my monocyte. We said it acts like kind of almost like a Pac-Man. And I'm just reminding you that its nucleus is kind of lobed and it's kidney shaped. And we can see it surrounding and engulfing the bacteria, and it's going to engulf all the ways around the bacteria and digest it. So it's a monocyte. Or it would digest pollen, or it would digest even sperm, or viruses, or fungi. It doesn't care what it's digesting. If your body didn't make it, it doesn't want it to be in your body. I hope you can see this. There's a little shine on it, but this is probably one of my favorite videos of a monocyte actually working, and it'll describe it much better than I could possibly do. So let's give it a go. So here you can see the monocyte just chasing the bacteria, trying to surround and engulf it. Any pathogen, any cell the body doesn't make, it's going to just surround, engulf and digest it. And you can see there that it captured it. So that's the end of the bacteria invading the body now. I hope that video described it well for you. So you could see the action of the monocyte, and anything that surrounds and engulfs another organism we would call a phagocyte. Now we've used that word already to describe the action of amoeba when amoeba used to surround and engulf its prey. So a phagocyte is an organism that surrounds and engulfs its prey. And the action of it is actually called phagocytosis. So a few new terms there for you. So if we were going to recap just quickly, so our first line of defense didn't work out, so we had to go to our second line of defense. So our body's reaction, we hear a lot of talk of this the last few days, that we get a fever, our temperature goes above 37 degrees, our body is really trying to kill off whatever pathogen has entered it, destroying the enzymes or the cell machinery in that pathogen. And then we produce histamines, little chemicals, often causing inflammation, which is just swelling because the blood vessels have dilated, have widened and have become porous, so more white blood cells can go to the scene where the invasion is happening. And then also at the same time, our white blood cells They're almost like an army going around our body. They're called monocytes. And we know from their shape that they're able to surround and engulf bacteria. And you just saw that in the little video chasing the bacteria down. And we call them phagocytes because they surround and engulf prey. And the process of what they're doing is called phagocytosis. So that's the end of our lesson today on the human defense system. So hopefully you have a better idea of our general defense system from different organs in our body trying to protect us. And then if that doesn't work out, then we have a second line of defense in our fever, histamines and monocytes. Keywords from today that I'd really like you to be aware of is that general means it's not specific. It's killing all pathogens, doesn't care what it attacks. Pathogen is a disease-causing organism that we want to get out of our body. Immunity is the body's ability to fight infection. And another key word, I suppose, is phagocyte. We saw it already in amoeba. It's an organism that surrounds and engulfs prey. Amoeba was feeding, whereas the monocyte here is trying to protect our body. And the process of surrounding and engulfing is called phagocytosis. I'm just going to post up just a little message for you on Teams. Thank you.